Glad to be back with your family for another Thursday night book club. We're gonna continue reading the Celestine prophecies. I don't know. We better be about wrapping it up. No, I didn't. We're on our root chakra, so that's gonna be our energy cleansing. We're gonna do the bowl, visualization, a new breathing exercise. Well, we did it Tuesday, so if you were part of Tuesday, then you definitely did the 4-4-4 breathing. Now my phone want to go crazy, right? Give me 1 second. Oh no, that's my tablet. It's happy to be cold up. I brought out the rain stick again too, so you know how that go. I don't know. That's the energy I had right now. So we're gonna have the bowl and the rain stick tonight. I gotta make sure the sound and stuff like that because I've been having a tendency this last week to forget. Okay, there we go. We good. Hold on. We got some comments. Oh, okay. Listen, let me tell you something, Marcel. I'm glad you're there, brother. I promise you, I set up that stream bot a minute ago, and I just went back and checked again, and it said it was finally active. So now I can see it's actually leaving comments, so I know it's active. So I appreciate you, family. So now you should be able. You got points. So you got some points. You can do some betting, some games and stuff you can play on Twitch. I don't know. Well, they're supposed to be on YouTube, but I don't know if they're showing up. So let me know if you see the games and all of that, brother. So okay, where we at? Root chakra. Red's the background. We're gonna start with the bowl. This week has been an interesting week for me so far, as one of the people who were affected by that federal pause and then unpause. And I had a couple of events that happened to me this week that had me at a loss of words. I basically got to turn down the noise canceling so y'all can actually hear it. stick. It might be because it's you. I see the gang's all out tonight, so I appreciate the whole gang. Listen, y'all definitely bring some luck. There's some good energy. Well, ain't no such thing as luck. So, but y'all definitely add to the energy to make things happen the way they supposed to. Okay. I know that I don't get that either. I don't know. So I guess well listen, I set it up so it makes sure you get a shout out every time you join too. So if I don't see you, the bot, the Swami bot is gonna make sure you get your piece. So we're gonna do the 4-4-4 breathing exercise. It is you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, and you breathe out for 4 seconds. Surprisingly, this time I just want to do it 3 times instead of Tuesday we did it 4 times. So we're gonna do 3 cycles back to back. 4-4-4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4. So we're gonna start on my count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4. Last time. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Release. 2, 3, 4. So the element for your root chakra is earth. So Tuesday, I like the visualization we did Tuesday, so I want to do that again. Clear your mind, and funny. I don't even know if you know who David Blaine is, but David Blaine used to be on TV all the time, and one of his tricks was he swear he could float, hover. So imagine yourself, David Blaine, and just kind of hovering above. I don't know. You can pick grass, you can pick sand, you can pick mud, you can pick whatever type of earth. Where I'm at, red clay is huge, so you even imagine red clay. But pick the type of earth that resonates with you, but you're not yet standing on it. You're just kind of hovering above it. And as you hover above it, you begin to look down at your feet. And between your feet and the ground, you begin to see something that kind of looks like roots growing from the ground and connecting to the soles of your feet. And as each root connects, it brings you closer and closer and closer to the earth, to the point that you can now feel the earth that you were just floating above. Whether it was each blade of grass or each grain of sand, or the feeling of how it meshes together when water mixes with it. But you can feel it squeezing in between your toes. And with every feel, every wiggle of your feet, you feel your stress, you feel your worries, you feel your concerns fade away. And those roots that were just connected to the soles of your feet are now nourishing you with new energy, an energy of resilience, an energy of clarity, an energy of hope, love, an energy of accountability, an energy of safety and worthy. And you can feel that energy going up through your feet, up through your legs, into your heart, and residing in your mind. And as you feel that energy transfer, I want you to repeat after me. I am safe and secure. I am grounded and centered. I am self-sufficient. I am financially secure. I love being in my body. I am safe and secure. I am grounded and centered. I am self-sufficient. I am financially secure. I love being in my body. All right, family, hold on, let me put this stick up before I'll be looking for it next week and can't find it. Or this weekend. Hold on. All right, so we're gonna pick up. Okay, he I was going to say he's in jail now. The main character went to Peru, and the church has some makeshift prison that is just picking people up and putting them in. But he met a priest in there who told him about, I believe it's the eighth insight. And he had a vision that he was going to be escaping with, I don't know, I guess I can remember her name. Was her name Marjorie? Um, yeah, but I think right now he is going to meet Cardinal Sebastian, and that is the main guy from the church who is against the insights. Oh man, hold on. Okay, I'm not even gonna trip. Interpersonal ethic. I followed the soldier up the steps and out into the bright sunshine. Pablo's warning was echoing in my head. Addiction to another person? What did he mean by that? What kind of addiction? The soldier led me down a path toward a parking area where two other soldiers stood beside a military jeep. They watched us intensely as we walked their way. When I was close enough to see inside the jeep, I noticed that the passenger was already sitting in the back. Marjorie. She looked pale and anxious. Before I could catch her eye, the soldier behind me grabbed my arm and directed me into the seat beside her. Two other soldiers climbed into the front seat. The one sitting on the driver's side glanced back at us briefly. Then he started the vehicle and headed north. Do you speak English? I asked the soldiers. The soldier in the passenger seat, a beefy man, looked at me blankly and said something in Spanish that I couldn't understand, then turned curtly away. I turned my attention to Marjorie. Are you all right? I asked in a whisper. I, uh, her voice faded, and I noticed tears were flowing down her face. It's going to be okay, I said, putting my arm around her. She looked up at me, forcing a smile, then rested her head on my shoulder. A ripple of passion filled my body. For an hour, we bounced along the unpaved road. Outside, the landscape grew continuously more lush and jungle-like. Then around one bend, the dense vegetation opened up into what appeared to be a small town. Wood-frame buildings lined both sides of the road. 100 yards ahead, a large truck blocked the way. Several soldiers motioned for us to stop. Beyond them were other vehicles, some with flashing yellow lights. I became alert. As we pulled to a stop, one of the soldiers outside walked up and said something I couldn't understand. The only word I recognized was gasoline. Our escorts left the Jeep and stood outside talking with the other soldiers. They glanced at us occasionally, weapons at their side. I noticed a small street which angled to the left. As I looked at the shops and doorways, something changed in my perception. The shapes and the colors of the buildings suddenly stood out and became more distinct. I whispered Marjorie's name and felt her look up, but before she could say anything, an enormous explosion rocked the Jeep. A blast of fire and light shot up from an area in front of us, and the soldiers were blown to the ground. Immediately, our vision was obscured by smoke and falling ash. Come on, I yelled, pulling Marjorie from the vehicle. Amid the confusion, we ran down the street in the direction I had been looking. Behind us, I could hear distant shouts and moans. Still engulfed with smoke, we ran perhaps 50 yards. Suddenly, I noticed a doorway to the left. In here, I shouted. The door was open, and we both ran inside. I fell against the door, closing it securely. When I turned around, I saw a middle-aged woman staring at us. We had dashed in someone's home. As I looked at her, attempting a smile, I noticed that the woman's expression was not one of horror, nor anger at having two strangers rush into her house after an explosion. Instead, what she displayed was an amused half-smile that looked more like resignation, as though she half expected us and now had something to do. On a chair nearby was a small child, about 4 years old. Hurry, she said in English. They will be looking for you. She ushered us into the back of a sparsely furnished living room, through a hall and down some wooden steps to a long cellar. The child walked at her side. We moved quickly through the cellar and up some other steps to an outside door leading to an alley. The woman unlocked a small compact car which was parked there and hurried us inside. She directed us to lay down in the back seat, threw a blanket over us, and pulled away in what seemed to be a northerly direction. Through it all, I remained speechless, carried along by a woman's intuition. That's not what that said, but a rush of energy filled my body as I fully realized what had happened. My intuition of escape had occurred. Marjorie lay beside me, her eyes tightly closed. "Are you all right?" I whispered. She looked up at me with tearful eyes and nodded. After about 15 minutes, the woman said, "I think you can sit up now." I pushed the blanket away and looked around. We seemed to be on the same road as before the explosion, only further north. "Who are you?" I asked. She turned and looked at me with her half smile. She was a shapely woman, about 40, with shoulder-length dark hair. "I'm Carla Dees," she said. "This is my daughter, Moretta." The child was smiling and looked over the passenger seat at us with large, inquisitive eyes. Her hair was jet black and also long. I told them who we were, then asked, "How did you know to help us?" Carla's smile grew wider. "You're running from the soldiers because of the manuscript, aren't you?" "Yes, but how did you know?" "I know the manuscript too." "Where are you taking us?" I asked. "I don't know that," she said. "You'll have to help me." I glanced at Marjorie. She was watching me closely as I spoke. "Right now, I don't know where to go," I said. "Before I was captured, I was trying to get to the Equos." "Why did you want to go there?" she asked. "I was trying to find a friend. He's looking for the ninth insight." "That's a dangerous thing." "I know." "Will you take us there? We will take you there, won't we, Marietta?" The little girl giggled and said with a sophistication beyond her years, "Of course." "What kind of explosion was that back there?" I asked. "I think it was a gas truck," she answered. "Earlier, an incident had occurred, a leak." I was still amazed at how quickly Carla had decided to help us, so I decided to press the question. "How did you know we were running from the soldiers?" She took a deep breath. "Yesterday, many military trucks were passing through the village going north. This is unusual, and it made me think of the time 2 months ago when friends of mine were taken away. My friends and I studied the manuscript together. We were the only ones in the village who had all 8 insights. Then the soldiers came and took my friends. I have not heard from them. As I watched the truck yesterday," she continued, "I knew the soldiers were continuing to hunt copies of the manuscript and that others, like my friends, would need help. I envisioned myself helping those people if I could. Of course, I suspect that it was meaningful that I was having that particular thought at that particular time. So when you came into my house, I was not surprised." She paused, then asked, "Have you ever experienced this?" "Yes," I said. Carla slowed the car. Ahead was a crossroads. "I think we should turn to the right here," she said. "It will take longer, but it will be safer." As Carla turned the car to the right, Moretta slid to the left and had to hold on to keep her seat from falling over. She giggled. Marjorie was staring appreciatively at the little girl. "How old is Moretta?" Marjorie asked Carla. Carla looked disturbed, then said gently, "Please don't talk about her as if she isn't here. If she was an adult, you would have addressed the question to her." "Oh, I'm sorry," Marjorie said. "I'm 5, Moretta said proudly. "Have you studied the 8th insight?" Carla asked. "No," Marjorie said. "I have only seen the 3rd insight." "I'm at the 8th, I said. "Do you have any copies?" "No," Carla said. "All copies were taken away by the soldiers." "Does the 8th insight talk about how we relate to children?" "Yes. It's about how all humans will eventually learn to relate to each other and talks of many things, such as how to project energy to others and how to avoid addictions to people." There was that warning again. I was about to ask Carla what it meant when Marjorie spoke. "Tell us about the 8th insight," she said. "The 8th insight," Carla explained, "is about using energy in a new way when relating to people in general, but it begins at the beginning. with children. How should we view children, I asked. We should view them as they really are, as endpoints in evolution that lead us forward. But in order to learn to evolve, they need our energy on a constant basis, unconditionally. The worst thing that can be done to children is to drain their energy while correcting them. That's, yes, I don't care how you justify it. This is what creates control dramas in him, as you already know. But these learned manipulations on the child part can be avoided if the adult give them all the energy they need, no matter what the situation. This is why they should always be included in conversation, especially in conversations about them. And you should never take responsibility for more children than you can give attention to. One of the reasons I left the classroom. The manuscript says all this, I asked. Yes, she said. And at the point about the number of children is highly stressed. I felt confused. Why is the number of children one has important? She glanced at me for an instant as she drove, because any one adult can only focus on and give attention to one child at a time. If there are too many children for the number of adults, then the adults become overwhelmed and unable to give enough energy. The children begin to compete with each other for the adults' time. That is true. In the classroom, oh my God, with 20 kids, they be competing. Sibling rivalry, I said, yes. But the manuscript says that this problem is more important than people think. Adults often glamorize the idea of large families and children growing up together. But children should learn that the world from adults, not from other children. That's right. In too many cultures, children are running in gangs. The manuscript says humans will slowly understand that they should not bring children into the world unless there is at least one adult committed to focus full attention all of the time on each child. But wait a minute, I said. In many situations, both parents must work to survive. This denies them the right to have children. Not necessarily. The manuscript says humans will learn to extend their families beyond blood ties so that someone else is able to provide one-on-one attention. All the energy does not have to come from the parents alone. In fact, it is better that it does not. But whoever cares for the children must provide this one-on-one attention. Well, I said, you've done something right. Beretta certainly seems mature. Carla frowned and said, don't tell me, tell her. Oh, right. I looked at the child. You act very grown up, Moretta. She looked away shyly for a moment and said, thank you. Carla hugged her warmly. Carla looked at me proudly. For the last 2 years, I've been trying to relate to Moretta according to the manuscript's guidelines. Moretta? The child smiled and nodded. I have tried to give her energy and to always tell her the truth of every situation in a language she can understand, for sure, because they do understand. When she asked the questions as a young child asked, I treat them very seriously, avoiding the temptation to give her fanciful answers, which is plainly for the entertainment of adults. It is. I smiled. Do you mean untruths like storks bring babies, that sort of thing? Yes, but these cultural expressions aren't bad. Children figures out these quickly because they stay the same. Worse are the distortions created by the spot. Worse are the distortions created on the spot by the adults just because they want to have a little fun. And because they believe the truth is too complicated for children to comprehend. But this is not right. The truth can always be expressed at a child's level of understanding. It just takes some thought. It does. What does the manuscript say about this issue? It says that we will always find a way to tell the child the truth. Part of me resisted this idea. I was one who enjoyed kidding around with children. Don't kids usually understand that adults are just playing? I said. All this seems to make them grow up too fast and take some of the fun out of childhood. She looked at me sternly. Moretta is full of fun. We chase and we tumble. We play all the childhood fantasy games. The difference is that when we are fantasizing, she knows it. I nodded. She was right, of course. Moretta seems confident, Carla continued, because I was there for her. I gave her one-on-one attention when she needed it. And if I wasn't there, my sister who lives next door was there. She always had an adult to answer her questions. And because she had this sincere attention, she has never felt that she had to act out or show off. She has always had enough energy that makes her assume she will continue to have enough, which makes the transition from receiving energy from adults to getting it from the universe, which we already talked about, much easier for her to grasp. I noticed the terrain outside. We were traveling through a deep jungle, and I thought I couldn't see it. I knew the sun was low in the afternoon sky. Can we get to Equos tonight? I asked. No, Carla said, but we can stay at a house I know. Near here? I asked. Yes, it is the house of a friend. He works for the Wildlife Service. He works for the government? Some of the Amazon is protected area. He is a local agent, but influential. His name is Juan Hinton. Do not worry. He believes in the manuscript, and they have never bothered him. By the time we arrived, the sky was completely dark. Around us, the jungle was alive with night sounds, the air mucky. The large, well-lit wood frame house stood at the end of a clearing in a dense foliage. Nearby were two large buildings and several jeeps. Another vehicle was up on blocks, and two men worked around lights underneath. A thin Peruvian, dressed in expensive clothing, answered Carla's knock and smiled at her until he noticed Marjorie, Moretta, and myself waiting on the steps. His face turned nervous and displeased as he talked to her in Spanish. She said something pleadingly in return, but his mannerisms and inflections indicated he did not want us to stay. Then, through the crack of the door, I noticed a lone female figure standing in the foyer. I moved a little to bring her face into view. It was Julia. As I looked, she turned her head and saw me, then quickly walked forward with a surprised look on her face. She touched the shoulder of the man at the door and said something quietly in his ear. The man nodded, then opened the door with a look of resignation. We all introduced ourselves to Hinton as he led the way into a den area. Julia looked at me and said, "We meet again." She wore khaki pants with pockets on the legs and a bright red shirt. "Yes, we do," I said. A Peruvian servant stopped Hinton, and after talking for a minute, the two walked into another part of the house. Julia sat in a chair by a coffee table and motioned for the rest of us to sit on the couch. Marjorie appeared panicked. She looked at me intensely. Carla also seemed to be aware of Marjorie's distress. She walked over and took her by the hand. "Let's go get some hot tea," she said. As they walked away, Marjorie glanced back at me. I smiled and I watched them until they turned the corner into the kitchen. Then I turned to face Julia. "So what do you think it means?" she asked. "What does what mean?" I replied, still distracted. "That we have run into each other again." "Oh, I don't know. How did you wind up with Carla and where are you going?" "She saved us. Marjorie and I had been detained by the Peruvian troops. When we escaped, she happened to be there to help us." Julia looked intense. "Tell me what occurred." I leaned back and told her the whole story, beginning at the point in which I had taken Father Carl's truck, and then all about the capture and our eventual escape. "And Carla agreed to take you to Equos?" Julia asked. "Yes. Why you want to go there?" That's where Will told Father Carl he was going. Will apparently has a lead on the Ninth Insight. Also, Sebastian is there for some reason. Julia nodded. "Yes, Sebastian has a mission near there. This is where he made his reputation, converting the Indians. What about you? What are you doing here?" Julia told me that she too wanted to find the Ninth Insight, but had no leads. She had come to this house after thinking repeatedly of her old friend Hinton. I was hardly listening. Marjorie and Carla had walked out of the kitchen and were standing in the hall, talking, cups of tea in their hand. Marjorie caught my eye but said nothing. "Has she read much of the manuscript?" Julia asked, nodding toward Marjorie. "Just the third insight," I said. "We can probably get her out of Peru if that's what she wants." I turned and looked at her. "How?" "Rolando's leaving tomorrow for Brazil. We have some friends at the American embassy there. They can get her back to the United States. We have helped other Americans this way. I looked at her and nodded tentatively. I realized I was having mixed feelings about what she had said. Part of me knew that leaving would be best for Marjorie, but another part of me wanted her to stay, to remain with me. I felt changed, energized when she was around. I think I need to talk with her, I finally said. Of course, Julia replied. We can talk later. I got up and walked towards her. Carla was heading back into the kitchen. Marjorie stepped around the corner of the hall out of sight. When I walked up, she was leaning back against the wall. I pulled Marjorie into my arms. My body pulsated. Feel that energy I asked, whispering into her ear? It's incredible, she said. What does it mean? I don't know. We have some kind of connection. I glanced around. No one can see us. We kissed passionately. When I pulled back to look at her face, she looked different, stronger. And I thought back to the day we had met at Vicente and to the conversation in the restaurant at Kula. I couldn't believe the amount of energy I felt for her presence when she touched me. She held me tightly. Since that day at Vicente, I said, I've wanted to be with you. I didn't know what to think about it then, but the energy is wonderful. I've never experienced anything like this. At the corner of my eye, I noticed Carla walking up smiling. She told us that dinner was ready, so we made our way into the dining room and found a huge buffet of fresh fruits and vegetables and breads. Everyone served their plates and sat around a large table. After Moretta sang a blessing song, we spent an hour and a half eating and talking casually. Hinton had lost his nervousness as he set a lighthearted mood which helped to ease the tension of our escape. Marjorie was talking freely and laughing. Sitting beside her filled me with warm love. Let's see what's going on. After dinner, Hinton took us back into the den where a custard dessert was served with a sweet liquor. Marjorie and I sat on the couch and fell into a long conversation about our past and significant life experiences. We seemed to grow closer and closer. The only difficulty we discovered was that she lived on the West Coast and I reside in the South. Later, Marjorie dismissed the problem and laughed heartily. I can't wait until we get back to the United States, she said. We'll have so much fun traveling back and forth. I sat back and gave her a serious look. Julia says she can arrange for you a way to go home now. You mean both of us, don't you? She replied. No, I can't go. Why? She asked. I can't leave without you, but I can't stand to stay here any longer either. I'll go crazy. You'll have to go on ahead. I'll be able to leave soon. No, she said loudly. I can't stand that. Carla, who was walking back into the den from putting Marietta to bed, glanced toward us. Then she looked away quickly. Hinton and Julie were still talking, seemingly oblivious to Marjorie's outburst. Please, Marjorie said, let's just go home. I looked away. Okay, fine, she said, stay. She stood and walked briskly toward another bedroom area. My gut wrenched as I watched Marjorie walk away. The energy I had gained with her collapsed, and I suddenly felt weak and confused. I tried to shake it off. After all, I told myself I hadn't known her that long. On the other hand, I thought maybe she was correct. Maybe I should just go home. What difference could I make here anyway? Back at home, I could perhaps marshal some support for the manuscript and stay alive as well. I stood up and started to follow her down the hall, but for some reason I sat back down. I couldn't decide what to do. May I join you for a minute? Carla was suddenly asking. I hadn't noticed that she was standing beside the sofa. Sure, I said. She sat down and looked at me with regard. I couldn't help overhearing what's going on, she said. And I thought that before you made your decision, You might want to hear what the eighth insight says about addictions to people. Yes, please. I want to know what that means. When one first learns to be clear and engage in one's evolution, any of us can be stopped suddenly by an addiction to another person. You're speaking of Marjorie and me, aren't you? Let me explain the process, and you judge for yourself. Okay. First, let me say that I had a very hard time with this part of the insight. I don't think we would have ever understood if I had not met Professor Renault. Renault, I exclaimed. I know him. We met when I was learning the fourth insight. Well, she said, we met when we both had reached the eighth insight. He stayed at my house for several days. I nodded in amusement. He said that the idea of an addiction, as used in the manuscript, explained why power struggles arise in a romantic relationships. We always wonder what causes the bliss and euphoria of love to end, to suddenly turn into conflict, and now we know. It is a result of the flow of energy between the individuals involved. When love first happens, the two individuals are giving each other energy unconsciously, and both people feel buoyant and elated. That's that incredible high we all call being in love. Unfortunately, once they expect this feeling to come from the other person, they cut themselves off from the energy in the universe and begin to rely more and more on the energy of each other. Only now that doesn't seem to be enough. And so they stop giving each other energy and fall back into their old dramas in an attempt to control each other and force each other's energy their way. At this point, the relationship degenerates into the usual power struggle. She hesitated for a moment, as if checking whether I understood, then added, Renault told me that our susceptibility to this kind of addiction can be described psychologically, if that will help you understand. I nodded again for her to continue. Renault said that the problem starts in our early family. It says fancily, so forgive me, people. Because of the energy competition there, none of us were able to complete an important psychological process. We weren't able to integrate our opposite sexual side. Our what? In my case, she continued, I wasn't able to integrate my male side. In your case, you weren't able to integrate your female side. It's funny because I was talking about this year. It's giving me an opportunity to work on my feminine energy, how I interact with it, how I carry it within myself, all types of stuff. So it's funny. The reason we become addicted to someone of the opposite sex is that we've yet to access this opposite energy within ourselves. You see, the mystical energy that we can tap in as inner source is both female and male. We can eventually open up to it, but when we first begin to evolve, we have to be careful. The integration process takes some time. If we connect prematurely with the human source for our female or male energy, it will block the universal supply. I told her I didn't understand. Think of how this integration is supposed to work in an ideal family, she explained, and then perhaps you can see what I mean. In any family, the child must first receive energy from the adults in its life, usually identifying with integrating the energy of the same sex parent is accomplished easily, but receiving energy from the other parent can be more difficult because of the differences in the sexes. Let's use the female child as an example. A little girl knows as she first attempts to integrate her male side is that she is extremely attracted to her father. She wants to be around him and close to her all the time. The manuscript explains that what she really wants is male energy, because this male energy complements her feminine side. From this male energy, she receives a sense of completion and euphoria, but she mistakenly thinks that the only way to have this energy is by sexually possessing her father and keeping him close physically. Interestingly, because she intuits that this energy is supposedly to be her own and that she should be able to command this energy at will, she wants to direct the father as if he were part of herself. She thinks he is magical and perfect and able to supply her every whim. In a less than ideal family, this sets up a power conflict between the little girl and her dad. Dramas are formed as she learns to posture herself in order to manipulate him into giving into her energy as she desires. But in an ideal family, the father will remain uncompetitive. He will continue to relate honestly and have enough energy so as to supply her unconditionally, even though he can't do everything she asks. The important thing to know here is our ideal example is the father that will remain open and communicative. She thinks he is ideal and magical, but if he honestly explains who he is and what he is doing and why, then the little girl can integrate his particular style and abilities and proceed past an unrealistic view of her father. Start to see you as a human. And in the end, our child, this ain't even just for fathers. I remember the day that I began to see my mama as a woman. She ain't just a mama. She is a woman too. Ooh, Lord have mercy. Once this true emulation takes place, then the child makes an easy transition from receiving her opposite energy sex from her father to receiving it as part of the overall energy existing in the universe at large. The problem, she went on, is that most parents up to now have been competing with their own children for energy, and that has affected us all. They do. Because this competition was taking place, none of us have quite resolved this opposite sex issue. We're all stuck at the stage where we're still looking for our opposite energy outside of ourselves. In the person of a male or female we can think of as ideal and magical and can possess sexually. See the problem? Yes, I said, I think so. In terms of our ability to evolve consciously, she continued, we are faced with a critical situation. As I said before, according to the eighth insight, when we first begin to evolve, we automatically begin to receive our opposite sex energy. It comes in naturally from the energy of the universe. But we must be careful because if another person comes along who offers this energy directly, we can cut ourselves off from the source and regress. She chuckled to herself. What are you laughing at? I asked. Renault once made this analogy, he said. He said that until we learn how to avoid this situation, we're walking around like a circle half complete. You know, we look like the letter C. We are very susceptible to a person of the opposite sex, some other circle half complete, coming up and joining with us, completing the circle that way and giving us a burst of euphoria and energy that feels like the wholeness that a full connection with the universe produces. In reality, we have only joined up with another person who is looking for their other half on the outside too. Renault said that this is the classical codependent relationship and that it has built-in problems that began to arise immediately. She hesitated, as though she expected me to say something, but I only nodded. You see, the problem is that with this completed person, this circle, that both people think that they have reached is that it has taken two people to make them one whole person, one supplying the feminine energy, one supplying the male energy. This one whole person consequently has two heads or two egos. Both people want to run this whole person they have created, and so, just as in childhood, both people want to command the other as if the other were themselves. This kind of illusion of completeness always breaks down into a power struggle. In the end, each person must take the other for granted. In the end, each person must take the other for granted, even invalidate them that they can lead this whole self in the direction that they want to go. But of course, that doesn't work, at least not anymore. Perhaps in the past, one of the partners was willing to submit themselves to the other, usually the woman, sometimes the man. But we are now waking up. No one wants to be subservient to anyone else any longer. I thought of what the first insight had conveyed about power struggles within intimate relationships and of the women's outburst at the restaurant with Charlene. So much for romance, I said. Oh, we can still have romance, Carla replied. But we first have to complete the circle on our own. We have to stabilize our channel with the universe. That takes time. But afterwards, we are never susceptible to this problem again, and we can have what the manuscript calls a higher relationship. Ooh, they talking about my life right now. You hear me? Uh, I said this did my hard work year, and I've done a lot and lit, man. Yeah. When we connect romantically with other people, another whole person, after that we create a super person. But it never pulls us from the path of our individual evolution, which is what you think Marjorie and I are doing to each other now, isn't it? Pulling ourselves off our paths? Yes. So how do we avoid these encounters, I asked? By resisting the love at first sight feeling for a while, by learning to have platonic relationships with members of the opposite sex. But remember the process. You must have these relationships only with people who will reveal themselves totally, telling you how and why what they are doing, what they're doing, just as they would have happened with the opposite sex parent during an ideal childhood. But understanding who these opposite sex friends really are on the inside, one breaks past one's own fantasy projection about that gender, and that releases us to connect with the universe again. Remember also, she continued, that this is not easy, especially if one has to break away from a current codependent relationship. It is a real pulling apart of energy. It hurts, but it must be done. Codependence is not some new malady, some of us have. We're all codependent and we're growing out of it now. We want to be interdependent. The idea is beginning to experience that sense of well-being and euphoria experienced in the first moment of a codependent relationship when you are alone. You get to have him or her on the inside. After that, you evolve forward and can find that special romantic relationship that really fits you. She paused, and who knows? If both you and Marjorie evolve further, perhaps you will find that you truly belong with each other. But understand, your relationship with her has no way of working now. Our conversation was interrupted as Hinton walked over and explained that he was retiring for the night and that our rooms had been prepared. We both expressed our appreciation for his hospitality, and as he walked away, Carla said, I think I'm going to bed also. We'll talk later. I nodded and watched her as she left. Then I felt the hand on my shoulder. It was Julia. I'm going to my room, she said. Do you know where yours is? I can show you. Please, I said. Where's Margie's room? She smiled as we walked down the hall, and I stopped in front of a particular door. Nowhere near yours, she said. Mr. Hinton is a very conservative man. I smiled back and bid her good night, then entered my room and held my stomach until I went to sleep. I awake to the smell of rich coffee. The aroma permeated the entire house. After I dressed and walked into the den, an older male houseworker offered me a glass of fresh grape juice, which I accepted. Good morning, Julia said from behind me. I turned around. Good morning. She looked at me intently and said, have you discovered yet why we ran into each other again? No, I said. I haven't been able to think about it. I've been trying to understand addictions. Yes, she replied. I saw. What do you mean? I could tell what was happening by the way your energy field looked. How did it look? I asked. Your energy was connected to Marjorie's. When you were sitting here and she was in the other room, your field stretched all the way in there and attached to hers. Listen, it ain't always visible where you can see that, but you can feel the energy. I'm thinking about my Reiki class. We practiced on each other, and I remember this dude. One of his problems, his energy just kept going. He was so attached to our Reiki teacher. I was like, yo, man, you gotta sever that, man. Yeah. Doo, doo. I shook my head. She smiled and put a hand on my shoulder. You had lost your connection with the universe. You had become addicted to Marjorie's energy as a substitute. It is the same way with all addiction one goes through, someone or something else to connect with the universe. The way to deal with this is to get your energy up and then center yourself again into what you're really doing here. I nodded and walked outside. She waited in the den for about 15 minutes. I practiced the method of building up energy that Sanchez had taught me. Gradually, the beauty had returned and I felt much lighter. I returned to the house. You look better, Julia said. I feel better, I replied. So what are your questions at this point? I thought for a minute. I had found Marjorie. That question had been answered, but I still wanted to find out where Will was. And I still wanted to understand how people would be acting towards each other if they follow the manuscript. If the manuscript's effect was positive, why would Sebastian and the other priests be worried? I looked at Julia. I need to grasp the rest of the eighth insight, and I still want to find Will. Maybe he has the ninth. I'm going to Ecos tomorrow, she said. Would you like to go? I hesitated. I think Will is there, she added. How do you know? Because of the thoughts I had about him last night. I said nothing. I had thoughts of you too, Julia continued. Of both of us going to Ecos. You're involved in this somehow. Involved in what? I asked. She grinned. In finding the last insight before Sebastian does. As she spoke, the image came to my mind of Julia and me arriving at Ecos, but then deciding to go in separate directions for some reason. I felt I had a purpose, but it was unclear. I focused again on Julia. She was smiling. Where were you? She asked. Sorry, I said. I was thinking about something. Was it important? I don't know. I was thinking that once we get to the Ecos, that we would go in two different directions. Rolando came into the room. I brought you the supplies you wanted, he said to Julia. He recognized me and nodded politely. Good, thank you, Julia replied. Did you see many soldiers? No, I didn't see any, he said. Margie walked into the room and then distracted me, but I could hear Julia explaining to Rolando that she thought Marjorie wanted to go with him to Brazil, where she would arrange passage back to the States. I went over to Marjorie. How did you sleep? I asked. She looked at me as though deciding whether to remain angry. Not very well, she said. I nodded toward Rolando. He's Julia's friend. He's leaving this morning for Brazil. From there, he will help you get back to the States. She appeared frightened. Look, you're going to be okay, I said. They've helped other Americans. They know people at the American embassy in Brazil. In no time, you'll be home. She nodded. I'm worried about you. I'll be fine. Don't worry. As soon as I get back to the U.S., I'll call you. From behind me, Hinton announced that breakfast was served. We walked into the dining room and ate. Afterwards, Julia and Rolando seemed to be in a hurry. Julia explained that it was important for Rolando and Marjorie to get across the border before dark, and the journey would take all day. Marjorie packed some clothes that Hinton had given to her, and later, while Julia and Rolando were talking by the door, I pulled Marjorie to the side. Don't worry about anything, I said. Just keep your eyes open, and perhaps you'll see other insights. She smiled but said nothing. I watched with Julia as Rolando helped her load her things into a small car. Her eyes met mine briefly as they drove away. Do you think they'll get through all right? I asked Julia. She looked at me and winked. Of course. And now we had better go as well. I have some clothes for you. She handed me a satchel of clothes, and we loaded these and several boxes of food stuff into a pickup truck. We then said goodbye to Hinton and Carla and Moretta and drove northeast towards the Ecos. As we traveled, the landscape grew even more jungle-like, and we saw very few signs of people. I began thinking of the eighth insight. Clearly, it was a new understanding of how to treat others, but I didn't understand it completely. Carla had told me of the way one should treat children and the dangers of addiction to a person, but both Pablo and Carla had alluded to a way to consciously project energy onto others. What was this about? I caught Julia's eye and said, I haven't quite grasped the eighth insight. How do we approach other people determines how quickly we evolve, how quickly our live questions are answered, she said. How does that work, I asked. Think about your own situation, she said. How have your questions been answered? My people who come along, I guess. Were you completely open to their messages? Not really. I was mainly aloof. Were the people who brought messages to you pulled back also? No. They were very open and helpful. I hesitated, unable of thinking of the correct way to express my idea. Did they help you by opening you up? She asked. Did they fill you with warmth and energy somehow? Her remark uncapped an eruption of memories. I recalled Will's soothing attitude when I was on the verge of panic in Lima, and Sanchez's fatherly hospitality, and Father Carl and Pablo and Carlo's concerned counsel, and now Julia's. They all had the same look in their eyes. Yes, I said, all of you have done that. That's right, she said. We have, and we're doing it consciously, following the eighth insight, by lifting you up and helping you to get clear. We could search for the truth, the messages that you had for us. Do you understand that? Energizing you is the best thing we could do for ourselves. We have to charge you up so we can get our messages from you. What does the manuscript says about all this exactly? It says that whenever people cross our path, there's always a message for us. Chance encounters do not exist, but somehow we respond to these encounters determines whether we are able to receive the message. If we have a conversation with someone who crosses our path and we don't see the message pertaining to our current questions, it does not mean there was no message. It only means we missed it for some reason. She thought for a moment, then continued. Have you ever run into an old friend or acquaintance, talked for a minute, and left, then run into him or her again that same day or that same week? Yes, I have, I replied. And what do you usually say? Something like, well, fancy seeing you again, and laugh and go on your way. Something like that. The manuscript says that what we should do instead in that situation is stop what we're doing, no matter what, and find out what the message we have for that person and that person has for us. The manuscript predicts that once humans grasp this reality, our interactions will slow down and become more purposeful and deliberate. But isn't that hard to do, especially with some people who wouldn't know what you were talking about? Yes, but the manuscript outlines the procedures. You mean the exact way we're supposed to treat each other? That's right. What does it say? Do you remember the third insight that humans are unique in the world of energy and that they can project their energy consciously? Yes. Do you remember how this is done? I recall John's lessons. Yes, it's done by appreciating the beauty of an object until it's enough energy comes into us to feel love. At that point, we can send the energy back. Okay, order S. All right. I'll finish this page. Maybe let me see. Yeah, we'll wrap up the page. Doo-doo-doo. That's right. And the same principle holds true with people. When we appreciate the shape and demeanor of a person, really focus on them until their shape and features begin to stand out and to have more presence, we can then send them energy, lifting them up. Of course, the first step is to keep our own energy high. Then we can start the flow of energy coming into us, through us, and into the other person. The more we appreciate their wholeness, their inner beauty, the more the energy flows into them, and naturally, the more that flows into us. She laughed. It's really rather a hedonistic thing to do, she said. The more we can love and appreciate others, the more energy that flows into us. That's why loving and energizing others is the best as possible thing we can do for ourselves. I've heard that before, I said. Father Sanchez says it often. I looked at Julia closely. I had the feeling I was seeing her deeper personality for the first time. She returned my gaze for an instant, then focused on the road. The effect on an individual of this projection of energy is immense, she said. Right now, for instance, you're filling me with energy. I can feel it. What I feel is a greater sense of lightness and clarity as I'm formulating my thoughts to speak, because you are giving me more energy than I would have otherwise. I can see that my truth is I can see what my truth is and more readily to give it to you. When I do that, you have a sense of revelation about what I'm saying. This leads you to a higher self even more fully and so appreciate it and focus on it at a deeper level, which gives me even more energy and even greater insight into my truth, and the cycle begins over. Two or more people doing this together can reach incredible highs as they build one another up and have it immediately return. You must understand, though, that this connection is completely different from a codependent relationship. A codependent relationship begins this way, but it soon becomes controlling because of addiction cuts them off from their source of energy. Real projecting of energy has no attachment or intent. Both people are just waiting for messages. As I spoke, I thought of a question. Pablo had said that I didn't get Father Costa's message at first because I set off his childhood drama. What do we do, I asked Julia, if the person we're speaking to is already operating the controlled drama and trying to pull us into? How do we cut through that? Julia answered quickly. The manuscript says if we do not assume the matching drama, then the person's drama will fall apart. I'm not sure I understand. Julia was looking at the road ahead. I could tell she was in thought. Somewhere right through here is a house where we can buy some gasoline. I looked down at the gauge. It indicated the truck's tank was half full. We still have plenty of gas, I said. Yes, I know, she replied. But I had thought about stopping and filling up, so I think we should. Okay. There's the road, she said, pointing to the right. We made a turn and drove almost a mile into the jungle before arriving at what looked like a supply house for fishermen and hunters. The dwelling was built at the edge of a river, and several fishing boats were tied to the dock. We pulled up to a rusty pump. Julia went inside to find the owner. I climbed out and stretched, then walked around the building to the water's edge. The air was extremely humid. Although the thick canopy of trees blocked the sun, I could tell it was almost directly overhead. Soon the temperature would be scorching. All right, family. That's it for this week. I hope you had fun. Hope to catch you next Thursday. Yeah, so see you Tuesday for Soul Swami Live. We are continuing our 7 spaces of healing. I think we have 3 left. Because I got the talking last week, we only got through 2. So yeah, we have 3 left. I'm gonna try to get through those 3. Or at least 2 of them, and then the Tuesday after that we can do the last one, and then I have some questions that we start asking ourselves. If we don't see you Tuesday, I hope we'll catch you back here on Thursday for book club again. Well, I don't know. We're getting close to the end. I don't know where we're at, so I hadn't paid attention. I hadn't checked, and I'm not going to check right now either. But I appreciate your support. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Peace, family.